This week we are covering forms. And with HTML5, we have a lot more tags and options with forms than we used to. So we do have the web-based readings that, and those readings are not that intense this week, but it just covers the different elements that you will find on forms and some of the HTML5 input types that are all new and how to style your forms. The lecture for this week is a lot more detailed because there is a lot of information on forms in your certification exam. And you will actually be creating forms this week. So there's a little bit more detail in here. As far as forms, I know you guys have all used them on the web. And typically how it works is you fill in a form and there's typically some editing taking place. And much of that editing is done using a front end language like JavaScript. There is some minor editing that HTML5 elements can do, but I would say the majority is done with a server-side language that is designed for front end. JavaScript and all of the JavaScript frameworks kind of fill that role. And so you fill in the form and the scripting language makes sure that you've done it right. And then you submit it. And when you submit the form, that is where the backend languages kind of take over. And it's their job to kind of clean up your data and update the database. And languages that are probably the most popular as far as backend goes is PHP. And that is a super old language, but it's really popular because WordPress was written in PHP. The other language that's pretty popular is ASP.NET, ASP.NET Core. That is the Microsoft server-side language. And that is actually the language that we use at NMC. Other languages that are also considered server-side or that have, a server-side component would be Python. Python has server-side capabilities. JavaScript actually does too, but they are not as widely used. There are also some additional frameworks that have a, server-side component, like Django, which is kind of an framework for Python. But again, they aren't quite as widely used. If you have an ISP, an internet service provider, depending on the access you have to the server, they may not want you digging around in the server or uploading scripts. And so they will provide common scripts for you. It just depends on what kind of access you have and what you're allowed to put on the server. The servers that I have, I pretty much have full access and I can put on the server whatever I want. So I can add databases, I can do scripting, I can pretty much do whatever I want. But, not all ISPs give you that kind of access. So that's something that you need to look for when you are shopping around. Scripts are typically used to maintain databases. That's the primary use. So they will do all of the CRUD functions. And the CRUD functions deal with creating content, reading content, updating, and deleting. Okay. Scripts can be used to publish catalogs or simply count the number of hits. Server-side image maps. I'm sure you guys have seen those where you've got a picture and you point at the different parts and different things pop up. Message boards for online discussion groups, email discussion, customer information, all of these things scripts interact with. Now, in order to use a script, when you submit your form, you need to know what the script expects to receive. Okay. So when you submit the form, your form is going to be sending the script information. And the script is programmed to look for specific things. So you need to know that in order to use the script. Once your form has been created, your users will be able to fill it in. And once they submit, it then goes to the script for processing. So what I did is I created a little script that basically reads the data in the form and displays it back to you. That way you don't have to really worry about what you're calling things because, and the program won't terminate if you call something different, or if you make a typo, it'll always work. So you guys will be submitting to a script, just like real forms are submitted to scripts. As far as the form elements go, I kind of summarize the main ones in this little table and describe what they do. Although I'm sure you guys are very familiar with this. And, these are live examples. So, you can play around with them. You can type in them, all that fun stuff. And then we get into, how do you create a form? And in HTML, that involves using the form tag. And the form tag has a lot of attributes that you need to put in it. And so two of the more important ones are the ID and the name. And usually these are the same. And the client side, or the front end scripting languages, use the ID. Okay, so they will, in any of the elements, you can target the ID and you can retrieve the information that was entered to make sure it was correct. Okay, and that's what the front end programs do. The server side programs don't use ID, they use name. Okay, and that's why in forms, in all of your elements, you will be giving it an ID and you will be giving it a name. And they are typically the same. Okay, and one is used by the server-side scripts and one is used by client-side scripts. Okay, so you've got, the back end working with name, the front end is working with ID. Method deals with how everything gets submitted to the script that's going to do the processing. If you use get, you will see all of the data on the address bar. And there is a limit to how much you can include. So get is not private. So you never use get if you are going to have any kind of personal or private information. Post is hidden and it goes with the HTTP header, okay, which is part of what gets submitted to the script. And then action is actually the script that you are submitting to. Okay, and so all of this is explained. And obviously for method, post is typically used for forms because it is confidential. You can't see the data. There is something called a mail to. So instead of submitting to a script, you submit to an email address. And so, I mean, you'd still have the name and the ID. The action then would be mail to : and then your email address or the email address of the person you're submitting to. Method is typically post, and then NC type, you need to put text in plain so that you can read it. So here's just an example of how that would look. This, because it's going through the email is not, it is not secure. So it is not designed to protect private information. So keep that in mind if you're doing a mail to. This is not something where you'd want the user to enter their credit card because it's not protected. Another thing about mail tos is that it's going to look for a mail program that is installed on your computer, like Microsoft Outlook. Okay, so if the person that you're sending this to, or the person that's viewing the form doesn't have any software installed for emailing, let's say they use Gmail or Yahoo or something like that, they aren't going to be able to use a mail to. Okay, because the mail to immediately tries to look on your system for some kind of program, mail program that it can use. As far as grouping elements, you will have logical groups of information inside of a field set. Okay, and then typically you'll have a legend, which is just a little title for that segment. And through CSS, we can style the field set. Okay, so as you look through here, I have lots and lots of examples. We go through input tags, and as you can see, probably a majority of the form elements that you see are going to be input tags. So the type or the tag is input. The type is what differentiates, the different elements that you see. So the type can be button, or it can be a checkbox. It can be a file. It can be hidden. It can be a radio button. It can be a text area like a comment box or just a regular text box. And then there's all these new HTML5 types that you can use as well. And I have tons and tons of examples in this. So as you go through, you will be learning about the different tags, and you will be learning about attributes. So this is a list of attributes that you can put in your tags. And they're all designed to do different things. And you've looked at name and ID already because we put that in the form tag. These other attributes are more for the different tags that we'll be entering data into. Okay, for example, value would be a default value. And an example would be, if you have a form and you want them to fill in state, you could just set the default value to Michigan if you think most of the people filling in the form live in Michigan. And then that just saves them time because they don't have to fill that in. Okay, so you can kind of look through these, read through. I think they're kind of self-explanatory. The ones that require more explanation, like list, you will see later on, they are used with a data list. Okay, so some of these, I think they're all pretty self-explanatory except for maybe list. And so you will see how that is used when we talk about data lists. And as you go through here, you will notice that these are all interactive. If you want to type in here, you can. And I also included the HTML that was used and the CSS that was used to style. And so these are entered as password boxes, so you can just kind of see how that works. And these also work. And these do too. And here's the code that was used. So you can kind of see how all of these little elements work. Okay, this is a fun one. Anytime you see a color box, you can actually pick colors and then click away. Now, that can be used with JavaScript to actually change color in your document. But this is kind of fun too, the dates. It'll fill those in for you, a little slider. So you can kind of play around with these as you read about them. Okay, and here's the data list. I was talking about that earlier. The list attribute is here. Okay, and whatever you enter for the list attribute in your input tag has to be the ID in the data list tag. Okay, it has to match up. And a data list is kind of like a drop down. Okay, it's just a new way of creating a drop down. Okay, and here's a comment box. Okay, so you can kind of read through this. I think with the examples, the live examples and the code examples, you guys can get a pretty good idea of what all of this does. And then we talk a little bit about validation. However, when we get into the 190 class, which is our JavaScript class, that is where we do most of the validating. There is, some basic things that you can do with HTML, but the majority is done through JavaScript. So I don't want you guys to worry too much about that. As far as the assignment goes, in the textbook assignment, you will be creating a form. And so I've given you the HTML and the background graphic. And so this is what it looks like. And as you can see, there's no form here. So you are going to be adding all of the form elements, and the form is going to end up showing up on the left-hand side. Okay, so right-click on that, download it, right-click on the graphic, download it into your Lesson 8 media folder. And this is what you need to type in. And I do know it's a lot. The good news is once you get a basic form like this, if you need to create another one, you can certainly copy and paste, okay, and then make some modifications. Okay, so this is definitely going to be the longest form that you're ever going to type, because from this point forward, you guys will be copying and pasting. But here is what you need to type in. You'll notice that I have some classes set up. And so if we take a look here at the code, okay, you will see that I've already added some of the formatting code for you. So this is CSS that we learned in lesson 4. So there's nothing new here, but we're just basically applying it to a form. Okay, and the form is set up as a flex box. Okay, so it'll be responsive. Okay, when you are done entering all of that, you need to view your form, and it should look like this example. If it doesn't, that usually means you made a typo, and it's easy to do considering how much you guys have to key for this particular assignment. But once you have the form and it looks like this, you're going to save it. Then you will copy it, basically. You're going to save it under a different name. You're going to call it Mail to Customer Form. And you'll open up the Mail to, and the only thing that you're going to change is, the action. and then you're going to add NC type. So you're basically going to create a mail to. Now, what I want you to remember is that if you go to test this, when you submit, it is going to look for Microsoft Outlook or some type of client program on your computer. And if you don't have that, you'll probably see an error window, or it might even try to install a client, and you can just cancel out. Okay. The mail to will not work unless you have client software installed. So keep that in mind. Okay, so that is the assignment. So you will end up turning in both the customer form and the mail to customer form. For the lab assignment, what you will be doing is creating your own form. And so what I've got is minimum requirements. And you can either create a form from scratch, or you can use the customer form from the textbook assignment as a foundation. These are all of the required elements that you need in the form. And so that's what I'm going to be looking for. And so for this particular form, we are not creating a mail to. What you want to do is create a hidden element with the email address. Okay, and then your form should submit to the processing program. Okay, so this is what your form tag should look like. Make sure you include the labels and that your labels are styled and that your form elements are styled. You should have group different areas using field set, and you should identify those areas using the legend. As far as a style sheet, you can do an internal or an external, totally up to you, but you should have a color scheme in mind that you're using. And your form elements do need to be properly aligned. Okay, because if your elements don't line up, then your form looks awful. So I have a couple examples. Okay, I have a technology use survey. This is a new example I just created. And so you can see I'm using kind of a fun little font that I got from Google Fonts. And this is required, and so is this. And the rest of these are optional. Email is required and phone. But I've got, different elements here. Here is my data list. Check boxes. This is an open list box that is created with a select tag. And I've got a comment box. And then I've got my submit and reset. Okay, and this is responsive. I did use Flexbox for this. If you're curious how I set this up, you can go to View Page Source. You can see the font that I pulled in and what it's called. And then you can kind of look through and see how I did everything. I've got this example as well. So the previous one, I centered everything. And you can see I did a little styling on the legend. Okay, and here I also styled the legend. It looks a little bit different, but you can see I've got option buttons and I've got check boxes. Okay, I've got an open list box, got a data list. I've got my comment area. And I did do an overflow on this so that, if you had to scroll, you can. But you can kind of take a look at this one by going to the page source as well. Okay, so I've got two different examples, plus you guys have the customer form that you can also look at. So lots and lots of examples for this. but you will be creating your own form with your own color scheme and styling. Now, when you're done, you're going to come down to the discussion forum. Okay. And you're going to post a link to your form. You need to explain who the audience is, what the purpose is, and how did you decide on the design and layout? You know, why did you group certain elements together? So I'm going to go ahead and add one. You do need to review the other students' posts and reply to one of them. So if you are an early bird and you get in here before everybody else, you certainly can reply to mine. So I'm going to go ahead and pause here. Alrighty, so here's my post. And so I added a link to the tech survey. And then I explained who the audience was, what the purpose is, and how I decided on the design and the layout, which is exactly what you guys need to do for your own forms. So that is what we are going to be working on this week. If you have any questions at all, or if you run into problems, please let me know. And I hope you guys all have fun designing your forms.